Sorry guys, for Hollywood, you gotta have the mics right up front, all right? So I know with contractors, you guys make fantastic investors, and the reason why is I can teach anyone on how to pick the right investment property. I can teach anyone, hey, you know what, this property is gonna cash flow, this one's not, this flip is gonna be great, your ROI is this, that, and the other. But one thing I cannot teach is how to quote a job. You guys being contractors, GCs, or plumbers, electricians, you guys know how to price these jobs appropriately. You have the trades either on your belt or right next door. You can do the timelines as you want. You can speed it up to get it done a little faster, or take some more time, especially if you're running a business while you're doing these flips or investment properties. You still want to have your regular business kind of flowing while you're working on some sort of major project. As well as with the kind of quality materials. So there's different levels of flips. You can either, what I call, put like lipstick on a pig, or you can have like, you know, a nice quality flip where you're gonna have a nice neighborhood and people are looking for those upscale kind of fixtures, right? And the last part and the most expensive piece of any flip is the labor. My wife calls it sweat equity. Because you guys control the labor, it makes it a much better investment and much better control of actually your costs. So you guys definitely have a leg up on any investors because you have an idea of how to quote jobs, control all labor, and put you guys in a much better position right from the get-go. All right, so next, I'm going to introduce my fantastic, esteemed panel. But before I get to that, I did a quick panel online of kind of things that help, kind of things that people usually want contractors to be better at. So top 3 things that kind of came up was communication. A lot of my clients, a lot of people I know have contractors who are like, okay, well, working on a job, you don't hear from them for 2-3 weeks, and they're like, all right, well, done in a month. So communication is really important. Next thing is timelines, kind of mentioned that. And then the last thing is cleanliness. So it's like, you know, if you guys are on a job site trying to clean up, hi. Hey, doing great. If you guys are on any job sites, try to clean up and keep things nice. Clients really, really enjoy that, and it sets you guys apart from any of the contractors because your place looks nice and clean, clear. Okay, so just come on in, pop in anywhere. All right, next piece. I'm going to introduce my esteemed panel over here. So you're going to get a chance to hear some advice about investment properties, flips, and either short-term, long-term. We're going to have a phenomenal mortgage broker, a accountant, and a real estate lawyer popping up in a second. So you guys can give me a quick round of applause for everyone coming up. Woo! High fives. There we go. So first, we'll start with Thanalia Marquez, principal mortgage broker with Pineapple, over a decade and a half experience. Is it 2 decades now?
Sure, I started when I was 4.
Well, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your experience, and anything you want to share with the audience here about how great you are at doing people's mortgage. You did my personal mortgage, both of them, 3 of them. Yes. And I refer all of my clients to Thana because she bats 1,000.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I've been doing mortgages since 2006. I've been licensed as a mortgage broker since 2019. Very proudly so. I do commercial and residential, but I do have a definite interest in credit challenges, but construction, flip, stuff like that. And I will correct you, I'm not principal broker of Pineapple Financial, but I am a mortgage broker at Pineapple Financial. And yeah, mortgages is what I do all day, every day.
Okay, we'll get to you in a little bit with any quick questions.
Yep.
But yeah, I do have a bunch of questions, but we'll save them for a second.
Yes.
Thana, thank you for being awesome and writing all those mortgages and getting people lending when they need it.
You're welcome.
And when they don't, right?
Yes, we can have those conversations too.
All right, next we got Christopher McAvoy from Leap Act Accounting. He is a chartered accountant, right? CA? I'm getting titles right this time. Chris has helped me save tens of thousands of dollars and make sure that I'm playing by all the rules to keep me in check with the CRA. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Thanks for having me here today, Sherman. So our firm is located in Fonthill, Ontario, for those who know where that is. That's in the middle of Niagara region. Truthfully, though, we have clients all over Canada, all over North America. We're very specialized in real estate, whether it's construction, flips, buy and hold, people who like to do BRRRR methods. So we're very familiar with all the strategies that people are using and a lot of the nuances related to the accounting and tax with that. So any questions you have at all, we're here to help.
Now, hey, you mentioned the BRRRR method, and I was going to have a prize for the first person who mentioned any acronyms, but we'll get to that in a second. Do you want to explain to people what a BRRRR is? Very short and sweet.
Sure. So it depends how many R's you want, but buy, reno, refinance, rent, repeat if you want another one, right? So basically the idea is you buy something that needs some love, where you can put in some sweat equity, generate some overhead, to make sure you have enough room to work. So that way you can buy, reno, do a refinancing at the end. If you want to get real advanced, you can do a perfect BRRRR if you're ever so lucky, which means you get all your original money back out at your refi. Hard to do, doesn't happen every time. But let's say you get most of your original money back out, and then you repeat.
Exciting.
You do it again. And now you have a rental property giving you some cash flow per door.
We already have a BRRRR fan in the house over here. Can we get a round of applause for BRRRR fan in the
Never
house?
too young to learn about BRRRRs. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly that. Which is your buy, your renovation, which you guys do, you rent it, and then you refinance and repeat if need be. A perfect BRRRR is fairly hard to do, but it's a good way to get some money in, get some money out, and generate some wealth. All right, so thank you for the non-accounting answer. And
I was gonna say, did I already win a prize? I think I heard you say that.
Maybe a shot of fire, maybe a shot of Fireball whiskey over here.
Oh boy.
All right, next we have Mr. Jonathan Marchand. He is a phenomenal lawyer with Hugh and Whitmore LLP. Is phenomenal lawyer the title?
McHugh Whitmore. But
McHugh?
yes.
All right.
Yeah. I don't think phenomenal lawyer is an official legal title, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'm John. Probably easier to say than Jonathan. And for those who are looking at my last name and asking, no, I am not related to Brad Marchand. I get that every time. We don't like him very much. Go Leafs. Yeah. So
he's on the Panthers now too.
I know. And of course, they are also the ones who kicked the Leafs out of the playoffs again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been a lawyer for 8 or 9 years. I've been doing real estate for about 5. I primarily act in the area of residential real estate. So by the time you're finishing your flip and wanting to actually put it on the market, that's when I'm going to be helping you out. I also help people in the front end, and I'm going to be talking today about kind of the different ways you can structure the ways to minimize your risk in purchases. I mean, we're going to get a lot of talk here about how you can make the most money. I'm going to unfortunately have the slightly less glamorous discussion on how you avoid losing money. How do you kind of minimize your risk? How do you protect yourselves? Because anytime you're dealing with real estate, the market is not rational. It's not always going to do the thing you want it to do. It's not always going to do the predictable thing. And you want to minimize the risk you're personally taking anytime you're doing something like this. So I'm going to be here to help you to do that.
That sounds glamorous. You say reducing risk?
Yes.
You saying like covering my assets?
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, pretty much.
All right. So we're going to have kind of a general open discussion here. I want you guys to feel comfortable to interrupt almost at any time, ask any questions you guys feel like. We're going to have a couple questions with everyone. I have some people who are calling me because they're late, so I will not answer that one. But if we're starting about how fantastic mortgage brokers are, I asked ChatGPT for something very smart and witty and said, as a mortgage broker, they know lenders that say yes when all the banks say no. So, yay. Thanks, Anna, for knowing that.
You're welcome.
But we're kind of getting right into the questions here. How can contractors finance their first flip when they don't have traditional income? So, not going to have your traditional T4 as you're being business owner. And are there any lenders who favor flips?
Yes, there is definitely lenders that their arena that they play in is absolutely flips. Like their marketing is for that. It's specifically, you can buy properties with 5% down. Obviously, you pay a premium for that. So your interest rate is higher. So your cost of borrowing, but that's where your beautiful brains come into it, where you're like, okay, I'm going to scoop this up for X number of dollars. I know how much it's going to cost me to renovate it, to get it ready to bring it back to market. So yes, I might pay, instead of the average mortgage rate of 4.5%, but I'm only into it for 5%. I'm paying a higher rate of interest. Does the math, right? Like you can absolutely look into that. And it's not income-based either. It's very much, what are you buying? What are you doing? What's the cost? So it's very much, they want you to pay them out as quickly as humanly possible as well. It specializes in people with no income, like no proper income, but specifically for the flipping process. It's not just for contractors, it's for anybody. Like anyone could walk in off the street to do this, but there's definitely lenders that specialize in flipping. When it comes to contractors, so whether you are an incorporated company, whether you're a sole proprietor, you're a partnership, there are different ways to structure your income. Everybody's picture is going to be different though. So obviously if you make, $200,000 a year, you write yourself down to 40,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right? Yes.
But there's other ways that we can take a look at your income. Again, assuming you still have some form of a paper trail. You have, say, bank statements. If you're going to tell me that I just stockpile everything under the mattress in my third bedroom, that's a whole other conversation, right? But you got to realize that there are options. It's not as cookie cutter as, unfortunately, we've been made to think that if the bank says no, that's it. No, there's definitely other options, but we just need to look at your whole picture. So again, laying all your cards on the table, there's definitely options for you. There are lenders that specialize and prefer this flip model, but we just need to know your picture and we can help structure it.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes. So I know in Canada it's a lot harder than in the States to flip itself.
Yes.
What would be the tax implications in this case? And I understand that. I'm sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, I was like, that's an accounting question. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So if you like, I'll keep that one in the vault for 2 minutes and I'll get Jason.
Yeah.
I promise I will answer you.
Yeah. That is a very important question as well. So when you are dealing in real estate, especially when you are doing a flip project, your power team is going to be your method of success. So an awesome realtor, awesome accountant, awesome mortgage broker, everybody has to work together to understand, tax implications, cost implications, things like that. That's a very good question. And absolutely, accountants are paramount to your success. Great question.
So
Hold on, Patrick. I'm not sure we can. Do you need the microphone? You need to be louder? Can we-
I think I can be loud. So I've invested a lot both in flips, in long-term rentals, and more recently in Airbnbs.
Oh, nice.
What I've found is locality is of huge importance. I'm an advocate of country properties, and I'm an advocate of vacation properties and Airbnb models. With that, I've had nothing but struggles in the B market.
Yep.
Whereas I've found mix and privates are a wonderful way to end
Yes.
in and work your way around. Do you have a
Yes.
preference between the mix and the full privates, or do you just kind of akin them in the same bracket?
So everybody's definitely going to be different. Everybody's literal picture is different. Everybody's property, right? So I literally take file by file. Personally, as a mortgage broker, I definitely favor the mix. Also from a...
Lastly?
I do like them. I do like them. But from like a more
I don't know,
personal security perspective.
we're gonna be geeking out over like mortgage lenders here.
It's all about money, my friend.
I was going to say, like, it's a money thing.
Make money.
Yeah, I personally, as a property owner myself, as a mortgage broker, I definitely prefer more structured lenders. I'm not having any issues with private lenders, but I find that a lot of people, including investors, they want to know, who is this that's lending me money? To them, it's a comfort thing. But to your point, some private lenders, like if it's just, Sherman lending out money, they may know, Kirkland Lake really well. So they're okay to lend money that I wouldn't lend, things like that. So it just depends on your pool of people, but also your client's comfort level. Personally, I prefer mix myself as a lender.
Now, do you find that when it comes to the B market, especially for people in this room who are probably running their own corp self-employed, these are a cakewalk because you can as little taxes you want and still show them your books and
Yes.
your mortgage.
Yes.
But there's always proximities to populated areas.
Yes. Yes.
Traditionally for your needs, what's the minimum population you've got to kind of be about 50 kilometers to before you start losing that pool?
So that's actually lender specific. So some lenders are like, well, I need the property to be within 50 kilometers of a town or city that has 50,000 people in it. Some are like, as long as there's 100 people, I'm okay. So that's actually lender specific. Yes. Yes, you can have a bunch of lenders saying no, 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 and the other were like, oh, I'll do that all day, every day. I make no comment.
He's Home Trust, another lender over here. Now, hey, for the audience, do you want to explain to people the difference with the mixed or the single lending, just so people have an idea?
Yeah, so a MIC is a mortgage investment corporation. So usually that's more of a traditional style of, for lack of a better word, institutional lender. So Glass Lake is an amazing one. Fiskard, like they're actual companies. Like you can Google them, there's online portals, things like that. So they're an actual company versus there's also private lenders that are individuals. So Sherman lends out money, I lend out money, actual human beings that just lend out money is another option.
My interest rate is 50% for anyone who wants to borrow any money from me.
That's your story. I don't want to quote the interest rate act, but I'm pretty sure that's illegal.
Yeah, very much so. You're not abiding to
39.5, something like that. It'll be something.
Yeah. Does he know that?
I work for you guys, not for the government.
There we go.
Yes. There's private
Federal
lenders.
employees here, my apologies. More condolences.
Now, I do have a question for Chris and Dana. Thank you for your answer. Appreciate that. Whoop, whoop. When we were talking about the CRA, give me an idea of some items that you can write off as a real estate investor, maybe some things that most people don't think about, and more importantly, how to avoid some of those red flags from the CRA.
Sure. So I'll try to answer a little bit of something this gentleman was talking about, as well as the other lady over there at the same time. So in terms of deductions, there's 2 or 3 main things you need to know, which is if you're doing a flip, your accounting is different than if you're building something you're going to buy and hold. And it's slightly different taxation-wise, whether you're incorporated or not incorporated. So if we use a simple example of you own a rental property in your personal name, you're going to deduct your mortgage interest, not your principal. You're going to deduct all the other things that relate to that period. So for instance, property taxes, insurance, utilities, if you pay those. The sort of more nuanced or more complex area is always you do a renovation. At what point do you capitalize it and treat it as part of the property, or just outright deduct it? Depending on what you're doing, you may have a slight penchant one way or the other. So for example, one of the things that I think makes a really great accountant as opposed to a good accountant is a great accountant is going to help you manage the balancing act between, do I want to look good for the bank and show income to get preferable lending rates? Or do I want to avoid taxes, right? And that really depends who you are. Because at the end of the day, it partly depends on which is higher, ultimately, the tax rate or the interest rate, right? When interest rates are super low, it's easy to say, I'll pay all the interest, save me the taxes, right? But some people got caught with that kind of thinking over the last few years, and they end up having struggles to make their payments, right? Sometimes people ask me a basic question like, should I pay off my mortgage or should I invest? And there's actually a number crunch there. There's no like yes, no answer. It depends what's the interest rate, what's the tax rate, right? Because functionally speaking, we don't care if we're paying more taxes or more interest. Functionally speaking, they're both a waste of money and they provide no additional value. You just want whatever total number is lowest, right? Between the two. Right?
Taxes, interest, both waste of money, and I hate them coming out of my pocket either way. So thank you. Thanks for this.
Exactly. And so what you're going to do is you're going to make decisions about, am I going for traditional banks and A lenders? Because I've done my number crunch and seen, okay, in my case, I'm going to pay way less interest, a little more taxes, but overall the number is the lowest. Or I'm going to say, to heck with that. I'm going to avoid paying these incredibly high taxes, pay a bit more interest, which is deductible anyway, and then I'm going to go on that path, and I'm going to not even worry about making the big five happy. I'm going to go for lenders like the ones you were just talking about, right? And so there's no one size fits all for everyone. It really is a number crunch. And so that's where a great accountant can help you. And the small point that I always add to this is like when you sit down with your accountants once a year to do your taxes, if they really should be asking you, what are your 5-year plans? What are your 3-year plans? What renewals do you have coming up?
To grow up. Is it to grow up 5 years? That's
what renewals do you have coming up in the next 3 to 5 years? Because you can also alternate this planning a little bit and say, well, for example, let's say I have a corp, right? I have a corporation. I control what I pay myself from my corporation, as long as I'm making money, right? So if I'm making money, then I decide, do I want that shiny T4 that makes the really big banks happy, or do I not care, right? And so what you may do is say, I've got a renewal coming up in the next few years. I'm going to pay myself a little more the next couple of years, then a lot less the following 3 years, right? Because I know I'm going to have my renewals in a couple of years, and I don't want problems at bank time, right? Where I've gone in there and I've told my accountant, the right answer is always zero taxes. That's always the right answer. Then 3 years goes by and they call up and say, hey, my mortgage renewal is coming due and the bank's telling me I didn't show any income. What the heck's going on here, right? And so you need to know how your tax plan and your legal plan and your financing plans all sort of intermix, because there's choices you can make there, but they are trade-offs. It's not like a magic bullet, so to speak, right? So you can you can decide though, with a lot of planning, which trade-off is best for you. And you can crunch that math to make sure that overall, on a multi-year basis, you've paid the least amount of interest and taxes. So I'll answer the rest of the question when the other lady comes back and can hear it. So that's a good place to stop though. Maybe I forget what the original question was, honestly.
The second question is...
I talked for so long, I forgot where I started.
Is how to avoid some of those red flags with the CRA.
Right,
but you know what? Hold on. I forgot to give ChatGPT's nice little sentence about accountants. Pull it back up over here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So accountants are great because they make sure your flips don't get you flipped by the CRA.
Yeah, so don't flip out is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, how do we avoid some of those red flags? I mean, like, and what is the CRA looking for? Can you help?
Yeah, absolutely.
CYA?
So yes, I'll help you cover your assets
There
for
we go.
sure. The first thing is just file on time and pay on time. That's the very first thing always, because CRA has this thing about if you're not filing and paying on time, you're probably hiding something or you're not ready to deal with something and they don't know what the something is, so they're more apt to review. The second thing is do high quality filings. And this is one area where real estate people will get a little carried away sometimes. They'll buy a property, they'll do a lot of work that probably should be capitalized and carried forward as part of the cost of the asset to reduce your capital gains later. But they'll kind of say, I really want my write-off now, and they'll write off like $100,000 of repairs or something. If you're going to do a very large repair deduction, you can pretty well count on CRA, depending on the size of your overall operation, maybe wanting to poke around with that one a little bit and then force you to carry those deductions forward. Also, some of this interrelates to knowing what it is that you have. So I'll finish answering this other question, which is Canada has a fairly bright line, which is 12 months. So if you've flipped a property in less than 12 months, so if you bought it, you've sold it, if all that happened in less than 12 months, what you have is a flip, which is business income, which is active income. If you've held it for more than a year, especially if you've rented it out, then what you're going to have when you sell is a capital gain. And so which one of these is better? Like, which one do you want, right? The answer to that depends if it's in your personal name or in a corporation. So for example, if you have a proprietorship and you're flipping in your personal name, that's all going on your personal tax return. In Canada, personal tax rates range from 20% to 53%, right? Whereas if you have a corporation, active business income is 12.2% on the first $500,000 of income after expenses annually. So if you're a flipper, it almost sounds like a bad joke. What do you call a company that does 10 flips a year? A construction company, right? Because you're in the construction business essentially, right? And so what they're really looking at is, okay, if you're in the flipping business, you're trying to buy these things like their inventory and sell them as if they're your inventory. Then you're a construction company and it's active. Whereas if you're holding something for more than 1 year, and especially if you're renting it out, then the viewpoint changes to this is actually passive income. And so in a corporation, passive income is taxed first at 50%, 50, but if you pay out dividends, then they lower it to 19.5. And so...
oh, wait, I like that.
Yeah, so that it cannot be bad. Whereas on your personal return, buy and holds are less problematic because typically what happens is you collect your rent, you pay your property taxes, your mortgage interest, your so on and so forth. There isn't necessarily a ton of taxable income there at the end of the day. Maybe you made 10, 15,000, sometimes less, depending on interest rates. So you're not going to send yourself shooting through those tax brackets and paying 50% personal tax. So especially if you're going to do a lot of flips, at some point, it probably does make a lot of sense to incorporate because you're going to pay way less, and then you can turn around and take that money and reinvest it into new properties. So if we're doing, investment return on investment 101, sometimes the people use the word tax drag. So if I make $1, pay 40 cents, now I have 60 cents left to reinvest. That's what happens if you're doing this on a personal return. If you're incorporated, you make $1, you pay 12 cents, now you have 88 cents left to reinvest. So if you multiply that, I see a good amount of young faces. So if you multiply that over 40 years, right, in your corporation, reinvesting that 88 cents instead of that 60 cents, you end up with literally a million or millions more than you would have by doing it in a corp, potentially, over a personal return. So, with capital gains, it's a little different. Some people who followed the news may have seen this thing about they're looking to increase capital gains rates on corporations, right?
Yep.
So this is, again, one good reason to potentially favor some flips over some capital gains, but we'll leave that aside for a second. And so in your personal name, a capital gain, you're going to have, and this is if this law stays the way that it was originally projected to. Nowadays, these things change like the wind, so you have to keep checking with your accountant. Like, one thing I always tell my clients is, I like to do fire prevention, not arson investigation. So ask me what you're going to do before you do it. Because if you do everything, then come talk to me. All I can do is investigate and tell you the damage, right? So ask before you do, especially because this stuff changes every 5 minutes nowadays, it seems like. But if it goes the way it seems like it's going, you'll get a $250,000 per person exemption on capital gains as a person. Whereas in a corporation, if you have a capital gain, you're going to pay the corporate rate on 2/3, which is higher than it was in the past. It still doesn't necessarily tell you which one's worse, the corp or the person, but it's leaning that it's a little bit worse capital gains wise in a corp. So this also partly depends on your business model for making money. For instance, if you're doing BRRRRs, when you refinance, that's not a capital gain. That's not taxable, right? So if you're mostly doing BRRRRs, your capital gain occurs years from now when you sell it, and the tax regime might be totally different in 10 or 20 years. We don't know. So maybe I'll take one follow-up question here and then go from there.
Oh, here, grab the microphone. I think it's on.
Yeah.
The volume's not super high, but yeah, go right into it and here. And did you want to introduce yourself too?
Oh, yeah, sorry, my name is Ryan. I'm a career makers, and one thing that we're looking to do in the next year or so is hopefully purchase a commercial property. And this is a role that we've never entered before.
Mm.
I have some case of finance commissions, so we're putting something together. Yeah. Everything you're talking about now, is that also proposed on the commercial side of things, or is that only for residential? I don't know the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll give a quick answer to that, and I'll pop it over to the rest of the team here if they want to answer. So the commercial versus residential is an interesting distinction for things like mortgages and legal issues. For tax, it actually makes very little difference because at the end of the day, flipping is flipping, rent is rent. So rent is almost always passive. You have to be a very large landlord. Like, for instance, Effort Trust that owns thousands of units. For them, it's active. The one rule is that if you have 5 of your own full-time employees, even if you're doing rent, you're now active. So for instance, if you bought a small motel, for instance, right, that would not be passive, that would be active. So this is one reason that sometimes people will say, tax laws are really crummy for like smaller landlords and smaller projects. Why don't we get 2 or 3 friends and buy a motel or do a bigger multifamily or something instead of all of us going alone? Because you start to get more favorable laws, more favorable tax treatments and so on. That's getting maybe a little more advanced. Don't start. If your personal advice, don't start with something that huge, start with something smaller. But partnering with people though, if you partner with people who are very experienced, that's a great way to get started, honestly. But to your point about, is there a tax difference there? No. The tax difference really is we're flipping or we're renting and we're incorporated or we're not. The actual property type, lots of other implications down this stream, but not for me.
In a nutshell, do you want me to answer for the commercial mortgage? Just in a nutshell, not to confuse anybody. Residential and commercial are definitely different for financing. Residential is very much, what do you do for work? What is your credit? How much do you make? It's very like what do the numbers look like? Commercial is more like, what are you buying? Are you going to work in there? Are you just going to rent it out? It's a different duck. It's a different animal. So the best guidance that I give people when they're just entering into commercial, knowledge is power. Make sure you ask the questions up front, align yourself with commercial real estate agent, commercial lawyers, a commercial accountant, commercial mortgage broker. Ask all the questions that you can. And in general, as an FYI, commercial transactions always take longer than residential. Always.
She's exactly right. Does this mic work?
Oh yeah.
Check. No check. One thing I did want to say is you said the magic word, knowledge is power. And especially on the commercial transactions, leases take a long time, purchases take a long time. The clauses are a whole lot more complicated, which we'll get into some of the clauses.
Yeah.
And negotiations take a longer time too. And the property's a little bigger, but there's so many more moving parts on the commercial side.
Like mixed. Sorry guys, I'm gonna use this.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what we're here for. Let's,
So the properties that we're looking at are with storefronts. downstairs,
Mixed commercial residential.
Yes, exactly.
No.
With apartments at the top, because it just makes more sense to be able to rent out both, we'll just be making more money.
Yep.
In those cases, I don't know what I don't know.
So similar to his answer, I could tell you something today. The lender appetite changes on Friday.
Yeah.
The reverse also happens. If you get a bunch of no in say January, February, the lender could turn around and be like, oh wait, no, I'm good with that now. Commercial is similar in a sense to residential, where policies are updated on a regular basis. So again, knowledge is the biggest one. So it really is transactional to the point where don't assume it's a no, don't assume it's a yes until you actually have your documents looked at. But it's very at the time. It's so who's buying it? So who's going on the purchase agreement? Who owns that business? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Ontario Inc. Who are the people that are on it? They do look at the human beings behind it because they want to look at your net worth, your personal guarantee, your credit, things like that. But most importantly, it's the building. What's going to happen with the building? Is there a tenant in place? Are you going to work out of it? Show me the money. That's what they want to know.
Yep.
What are you buying?
What kind of lease?
How like projections.
Yes.
How much we're going to be making.
Yes. Yes. Are you taking over the tenants that are there? Things like that. Similar to when we were buying just a single house or things like that. They want to know, is there a tenant in place or do you need to boot them out and redo the process?
Yeah, and a big value with those kind of mixed use buildings is that you're often going to find 1 or 2 or 3 of those residential units up there, and the residential rates are going to kind of fluctuate, but your commercial, depending on what it is, especially restaurants here in Hamilton, are in high demand. And you can kind of change around the use of those to whatever meets the needs or whatever has the highest value use, whereas your res units, they're residential. They're going to stick like that the whole time. Yeah, there's a couple of good options here in Hamilton. In St. Catharines, there's a bunch as well too. Cambridge is a couple. There's a couple good options.
Actually, I saw a property on Saturday on crypto. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I see. I heard a magic word over here, which was personal guarantees. So, and that's something that, from a legal perspective, this is where you're really going to come into it, because the main benefits you get from doing something like incorporation is you're creating a separate legal entity. So you're putting like a body in between you and whatever bad thing could possibly happen with your investment. So if you're trying to minimize risk, putting that corporation in between you and them, there's a legal concept called corporate personhood, which says if a corporation is signing a lease with someone and there's some breach or some problem, that person can only sue the corporation. They can't go behind and go after your house or your assets or anything like that. But when you're getting a mortgage to do these kind of corporate mixed properties, I'd say 99% of the time, if you don't have any other major investments, like you don't have another property that you're going to mortgage, you don't have money in the bank that the bank can come and get, they want a personal guarantee from you, which means your own assets, your own house, your own investments, they're all going to be on the line if something happens. And sometimes these things that can happen are beyond your control. I had a lot of clients who decided to buy a lot of rental units when the mortgage rates were 1.5%. And then they expected, hey, maybe they'll go up to 4%. Then they went up to 5.7.
Yep.
And a lot of those people then had to immediately sell those properties, which then triggered capital gains, and it's a giant ball that rolls downhill. So if there's a lot of risk that can happen in those situations, and you can minimize that risk by kind of, like you said, starting slow and kind of, going in the lower value ones, because the higher the value you're dealing with, the more complications you're going to get, and the more kind of guarantees the bank is going to be looking for. And if you don't have, $500,000 sitting in the bank can look at it and say, oh, well, we'll get our money back that way. They might be asking for personal guarantees. You're putting your own stuff on the line.
Okay, and then a question for advanced corporations.
Yep.
So I have my name myself, like corporation as like the holder.
Mhm.
In those cases, would you recommend having others on corporation as like CEOs or whatever it is, just for
So primarily with corporations, the liability
Now,
in
that
a
is one other you
corporation.
can have on your corporation as well too. I think she'd be fantastic to have on there.
I'm guessing she's not 18, so you're not going to be able to give her shares.
Okay, maybe not just yet.
So not yet.
Well, we're gonna start paying for them.
There we go.
Well, you'll be paying for her for a while. Trust me on that one. There's a good question. If you have more directors, you can spread out liability that way. Officers don't have necessarily liability in a corporation. If there's going to be a liability for some act the corporation does that makes a mistake or causes damage, that's director liability. So the directors are the people who can sign for the corporation. They are the people who are on record as controlling the corporation. Now, I'm going to give you the very lawyer answer here, which is it depends. Because having said that, that's just the default rule. The benefit of corporations is that you have a lot of control in how you structure it. So you can do what's called the shareholder agreement, where every person who holds a part of the corporation can come together and make rules on how the corporation is going to operate. So you can say, okay, well, technically, this person has 51% of the corporation. So by the basic rules, they can do whatever they want. Everyone else together can't outvote them. Nothing we can do about it.
Yep.
Except if you have a unanimous shareholders agreement, you can say, okay, well, wait, it doesn't matter if we're going to do that, because now if we want to make these big decisions like buying property, mortgaging property, canceling the corporation, paying everyone out dividends, we need now 66% approval. So now this minor investor who previously would have basically no power because the 51% guy could do whatever they wanted, this minor investor now has control. Because if you don't get a unanimous decision, nothing happens. So everyone then has to be on the same page. And so a corporation gives you a lot more ability to do that and to kind of make these kind of very minute changes. And you can make these changes again anytime you want, as long as everyone agrees. And the other options that you would have in a case like this, and I mean, I'm probably jumping ahead in a little bit.
You are jumping ahead. I didn't even get a chance to give you your introduction yet.
My
goodness.
Sorry. I heard a question. I was interested.
Oh, man.
I heard a question. I was trying to give an answer.
How about this? Let me throw it in here. Okay, for lawyers, they read the fine print so you don't accidentally buy a house with 5 liens and a ghost.
Haven't had 5 liens and a ghost.
5 liens and a ghost.
I had the 5 liens. I haven't seen a ghost.
There we go.
He's talking about an actual ghost.
Oh.
Okay,
Not an actual legal concept. That was just a joke. Don't worry about it. Although I will say I have had a property a little while ago, because sometimes banks aren't so quick at removing mortgages from properties. They take a while, 1 year, 2 years, 75 years. So I had a mortgage that was still on title from 1955.
Oh.
And back then, mortgages were a little different. So you had a mortgage that was on title for $5,000 in 1955. Doesn't seem so bad. Interest rate, 22.5% a year.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, I said, compound interest is really crazy, right? What would happen if this mortgage was still enforceable now? So I ran the numbers. So if you had $5,000 and you compounded 23% a year for 70 years, the final amount that you would owe the bank at the end of the day is $400 million and some odd dollars. So compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. Luckily, there is a Mortgages Act in Ontario that says after 10 years, if they haven't collected anything from you, you haven't signed in writing saying you still owned it, mortgage is no longer enforceable. So we managed to contact the bank and get that off title. It was very lucky for the person that was not needing to be paid out, because it would have bankrupted the province. Anyway.
Exercised a ghost mortgage.
Yes, effectively, yes, that is what I did.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah,
so
John. Wow.
That we did manage to get rid of that one.
Is it good to be like a legal exorcist? Is that a title?
Yeah, that sounds like a great title.
All right,
that sounds like a great title.
All right.
So you can see these other things that are on title, and this is the kind of thing that you only find out about after you've already signed the agreement to buy. Now, there are ways to get out of it in those situations. If the seller is unable to resolve problems like that, there's a little exit clause in the agreement that says, your lawyer can ask us to do this within 2 weeks of closing. If they haven't done it by the closing date, you can back out of the agreement. If they're unwilling or unable to remove something that could damage the property, and this is dealing with like legal title, you can get out of the agreement. So ideally, you do your due diligence up front. And this due diligence, I should probably define that term. So that's basically you as the buyer it's everything you buy in kind of generally in real estate, you should assume it's buyer beware, which means expect the guy is trying to hide something from you. Expect that there's a bunch of crap in there you're not going to find out about until after closing.
Surprises.
You're going to open up a wall and you're going to find some idiot did some do-it-yourself electrical work. Which
Don't open up that wall.
But you're going to find out about it. You're going to find out about when you flick one light switch in the basement and all of your lights upstairs turn on, and you're going to wonder what the hell just happened there. So there's going to be some do-it-yourself electrical work. Someone did something stupid. You're not going to find out about it until later. Or you're going to find out about it after you've already signed what should be a binding agreement. And you're saying, well, now am I stuck paying $1 million for this crap hole? And you can be in that situation. So doing your due diligence is basically you as the buyer ahead of time saying, okay, I'm going to get an inspector in there. I'm going to get an engineer in there. I'm going to get somebody in there who knows what they're doing, somebody who can tell me, am I about to buy a lemon? And to do that, you have a condition in the agreement that says, okay, in the event that we find something during this period, and for commercial, this is why, as she noted, commercial deals take friggin' forever.
Yep.
Because that due diligence period can be 90 days, 180 days. I've seen year-long ones on big properties. Like we did a big commercial
I have one that's
sale.
like that's 30 days right now as we speak.
Yeah.
And we just one condition on it. It's a 30 day.
We have, you have a big commercial sale and they've got to look at 15 different engineering units. They've got to go back 40 years to check, who's owned the property before. There's like $100 million mortgage on the condo corporation. This condo corporation was done in 1973 and the rules have changed. They don't know if they've kept the reserve fund study up to date. So all of this stuff, you got to do a lot of research and you generally hire people to do that for you. In a residential property, you just hire a home inspector. And I see home inspections on a shirt over here. So
this guy over here?
So you hire a home inspector, they check everything out for you, and hopefully you're not buying something terrible. And then, of course, there are going to be 500 exceptions on the policy. I know you're not going to be guaranteed. Okay.
What we are seeing is especially with the economy as it is, we're seeing a lot of people jump into private seconds, pay off debts. And whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a lot of deals in the last, let's say, 6 months, where on closing, there's a complete cluster of an unknown secondary mortgage on the property.
Yep.
Has that affected at all when you're initiating the title search as a lawyer in the process?
We generally always are doing title searches, I would say like a week before the date. So every agreement, by the time I get this, I don't have any control. Like 90% of my deals, I get the deal already signed. So I haven't seen the agreement before it's signed. I have no way to change the title search date or things like that. Most real estate agents who are good, who are kind of responsible, know what they're doing,
2 weeks.
they'll put at least 2 weeks before the closing date.
Yep.
And that gives you time. Ideally, as a lawyer, you want like 2 weeks from the day it's signed to kind of review everything, do your title search, and then 2 weeks between the title search date and the closing date so that if there are problems, the seller has time to fix them. Because you don't want to then say, oh, well, your title search date is 2 days before closing. You go to the seller with this giant list of problems and they say, how the hell am I supposed to do that in 48 hours? It's not going to happen. So then you either have to extend the deal and then you have to call the mortgage. You have to it's just a mess. You don't want to do that if you don't have to. And then people start arguing about, oh, well, who's paying my costs for that week of extra closing time? And
Yeah, not me.
yeah, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be you. We get big arguments. Yeah, I would say if you find things like that, I try to find them early. I'm contacting the client and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with them. The unfortunate reality is when you see some of these mortgages that are they're obvious mistakes. No one is going to try to claim a mortgage from 1982 from Frontenac, mortgage company that went out of business in 1988. I've seen that. No one's ever going to try to claim that. It's not actually going to hurt your title, but a bank is going to look at that and say, I don't care if it's valid or not. I don't care if it's, if that person exists or not. It's a mortgage. It's ahead of my mortgage. There's a snowball's chance in hell that that's going to stop me from getting my money back. You aren't getting a penny from me until you actually get rid of that. And the unfortunate reality is if the business if the company went out of business, if the person who gave the mortgage is dead, if no one is able to give testimony on that, you got to go to court. You got to have a judge sign off on it. And with our court system, that's going to take 2 months and it's going to cost you $5,000 out of your pocket. And it sucks, but that's the reality. And so if you want to just close anyway, if you're paying cash, you can choose to take the risk yourself. If you're not paying cash, the bank is going to say you aren't getting a penny until you resolve this. So you've got to either delay the deal or back out of it. And the benefit of that is that if you're the buyer, you can be in a position where you can say, okay, well, seller, I have a clause in the agreement that says, if you don't fix this, I'm out of here. Give me my deposit back. I'm out the door.
Yep.
And as the seller, unfortunately, you're in a position where you can say, well, I can't fix this for 3 months. And the buyer says, well, I don't care. You didn't get it by the day of closing. I'm out the door. And you're just stuck. Like as the seller, you have to give them their deposit back and they're out the door.
Now, many of our realtors have the ability to sort of, this is trade secret, but they're able to actually purchase the financial history of the property itself.
Mortgage
Like,
brokers can do that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with that,
Geo warehouse.
exposure to how much mortgage is left, how many liens or loans are on the
Yeah.
property. If that's something that's flagged early enough, could you as a lawyer, as a preemptive, be like,
You can jump
maybe
ahead of
I'll
the game.
just
Yeah.
jump in early and make sure that
And sometimes you have to kind of be a PI to do that,
fair enough.
because like I had one where this company went out of business in 1973. That business at the time was bought out by another company, which was an investment company. That company was then bought out by BDC. So then we had to contact BDC and say, hey, you bought some guys who had a mortgage. Can you, as the people who have inherited all of their assets, please sign this so I can delete that mortgage? Obviously, they don't owe you any money. You know this. This has been on there for 30 years. Can you please sign this? And I got them to sign it, and we got the mortgage off. But if you do that search and you can't find anybody, you got to go to a judge. And it sucks when you're in that position. But there's not much you can do. The problem is that although Geo Warehouse will show you like active mortgages, a lot of these are things that have actually been paid off. So that in the financial history of the property, it doesn't exist anymore. It's just still on legal title. Because back then, you didn't have an electronic system to keep track of everyone's titles. It was literally just 500 books that were in some office somewhere called a land registry office. And you'd go in and pull out the book and write in writing that no one can actually read, the name of the mortgage, the number, the time, and it was paid off. And if that page got lost, when it got converted from the paper deed to the electronic system, it still shows on the electronic system that there's this 1955 mortgage, even though everyone involved knew it had been paid off in 62. It didn't matter. So it doesn't show up in any of the financial searches, doesn't show up on Geo Warehouse, but it shows up on the title to the property. And because it's on the title, the bank still complains about it.
I was going to say, we've gone straight past the university and we're heading on to postdoctoral work.
That's true.
Let's
That's
bring
true.
us back down to earth here.
That's true. Let's
Oh,
come
sorry.
back.
Have to do with the price of cheese and Bulgaria.
That's true. We have gone a little
We were
too
supposed to
far.
be at 20,000 feet over here, giving some high level stuff. We're gone into the weeds a little bit. Thanks, Patrick. We've been
Like, these are risks that you can see, but I don't like to bring them up a lot of times ahead of time because it scares people. And like this happens, I'm going to be honest, like I do 300 deals a year. This kind of thing happens in like one deal a year or like two. So, you know, your chances of this happening in your particular deal, if you're doing one deal every 2 years, minuscule, absolutely minuscule. So,
You know, and that was one of my questions I was going to ask was what some of the legal risks of buying older homes? And you have fantastically answered my question. Should be a prize for that one too. And then also I was going to ask, you know, what are some things that kind of delay your flip? Any legal issues that can delay a flip or, you know, delay closing? And you kind of covered some of those as well too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and a big thing that can delay closing is all of a sudden your mortgage money doesn't come on time. We had the big problem with this kind of in 2023 when the rates jumped up really quick because as the rates jumped up, the market prices for properties dropped. And banks always have fine print. And one of the things they have in fine print is, hey, we can do a new assessment of your property right before closing. And if we decide that the price has dropped, we're going to lower the amount we're giving you. So I had a case like this where a client, a week before closing, the bank decided, hey, we're going to give you $50,000 less. And he said, well, you promised to give me more. And they said, well, read the fine print. No, we didn't. We promised to give you what the house is worth. And it's not worth that. So he then had to find a private lender to do a second mortgage with a week's notice and paid 14% on $50,000. So, and we had to delay by a week. So in addition to that 14%, he had to pay the seller's costs, which was $200 a day for their mortgage, which was $100 of housing costs, which was $100 of food costs. Just, it was like an extra $3K at the end of the day for a week. And that's low. I've seen some people ask for absolutely ridiculous numbers for an extension. And the unfortunate reality is, regardless of the reason, if you as a buyer can't close on the day of closing, it's your butt on the line. So if you don't close, you're going to get your butt sued off. Your deposit is going to be gone. They're going to sell the property for less and they're going to sue you for the difference. And you're going to lose because you signed a contract. So it's very dangerous in that respect. But if you're paying cash, you don't have to worry about any of this because you can choose to take the risk yourself. There's always risks with a mortgage.
Write that check, 1.2. Here you guys go. Just,
You're
you
all
know,
set.
easy peasy.
But usually you've already flipped a couple by the time you've got that money in the bank.
All right. Well, you did cover all the questions, which is great. No more acronyms, which is great. Next question for Thana. Now, if we're looking at income properties, buying investment properties that have 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 units, anything under 5, not to be commercial. Are there any other kind of financing options that would help if the unit is already rented out and there's income generating already? And are there some lenders who kind of favor that?
So when it comes to a tenanted property, so it doesn't matter if it's your typical single family detached and you're renting out the basement, or it's an upstairs and a downstairs, doesn't matter what it is. The one thing that we have to remember is that every lender looks at the rental income differently, right? Sherman knows this in and out. It is not a cookie cutter process to be like, oh, everybody, big green, big blue, big red bank is all going to look at me the same. No. So number one, someone mentioned it before, credit policies can change at any given time. So what could have been a yes in January is now a no in August, vice versa. When we look at income as it pertains to rental property, every lender is going to say, okay, how much are you renting this property out for? Is it upstairs, downstairs? Is it a self-contained unit? And that's material, by the way. I'll get into that in a second. But how much are you renting it out for? And also, how does it compare to the market? If you tell me that you're renting a basement unit south of Cannon for $2,900 per month, but I look at the stats and it's normally $1,900, the lender will not just say, oh, no problem, I'll take 50% or 80% of that value. They're going to compare it to what the normal market says. So number one is that different lenders look at your rental income differently. Not everybody is the same way. They do look at, is it a self-contained unit? And this is a big, big thing that I hear a lot of people saying, oh, someone lives upstairs, someone lives downstairs. But the downstairs is literally separated by a curtain, doesn't have a self-contained basement or a self-contained unit. Now, in the world of financing, self-contained unit means I have my own key, my own lock. It's a separate apartment. Like, you can't just go behind the curtain to get to my unit. You're not sharing the front door, walking down the stairs to the basement apartment. You need to be self-contained. You've got your own bathroom, your own kitchen. Could be a kitchenette, doesn't have to be like a formal room. Ideally, you want to have at least one bedroom, but there are some lenders that are okay with basement, like bachelor units. The key here is definitely that it's self-contained. But the biggest thing to remember is that you have to be able to prove income either through a lease agreement if you're taking over an existing tenant. But the biggest thing to remember is just that not every lender is going to look at that rental income the exact same way. I'm sure we all have, others that we know of that are like, oh, this bank said no, this bank said no. Oh, so-and-so approved me. Totally regular, totally normal, that happens, but it's for this reason. Every lender's policy is different. And this is where you kind of need to remind yourself as you're going into this that, okay, I don't know what I don't know, but let me get through with people, good broker, good realtor, people that can ask the questions for you. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, you definitely got to check with your realtors and make sure everything is safe and sound. But yeah, income properties are great. One thing is that and I'll get into the in-law suite, or what I call the best friend suite as well too. That is sometimes a unit that cannot be used to qualify if it is not, if it's covered by like a heavy drape to create like your separate unit. It's another way to kind of generate more income, but obviously cannot be used to qualify for your mortgage.
That's
so,
right. It needs to be self-contained.
Yeah, completely self-contained. Even if it's a heavy drape and another unit.
Not if it's a heavy drape.
Okay.
It needs to be self-contained fully.
Next question is for Chris. Give me some of the pros and cons of the short-term versus long-term on your investment properties. So, and I know you did touch on this very briefly, but yeah, if it's like a short hold for like 3 years or like a longer hold for 10 years, and moving your strategy in between there.
Yeah, so Canada Revenue Agency's basic definition is less than 12 months would be a flip, more than 12 months would be a hold. If you're only flipping, you might be able to exceed the 12 months by a little bit and still have it as business income. I'll talk about short-term versus long-term rental for a minute. There's slightly different rules for income tax versus for excise tax. So Excise Tax Act means GST, HST, right? And John might be thinking what I'm thinking right now, which is GST, HST is always this like X factor curveball on every deal that needs to be worked out in advance if possible, and oftentimes causes a lot of last minute consternation, especially if people can't get a hold of their accountants. So one of the things you need to know is, does HST apply to your sale or not, or to your purchase or not? Do you need to be registered? Is your buyer registered? And I'll explain a little bit about why this is important, and then I'll give you a huge thing to watch out for. I'll start with just a little bit of context here. Less than 30 days is short-term rental. More than 30 days is long-term rental, right? This parallels a lot of the, and I got pretty far before I mentioned these people today, the Ontario Landlord Tenant Board. So I see someone might have heard of them before. So yeah. So a lot of people switched over to Airbnb for two reasons instead of long-term rentals. Reason number one is they want to avoid tenants getting long-term tenant rights. And if I start giving legal advice, just slap my hand or snap your fingers or something.
Here, I'll slap
So
your
far,
hand. Here,
I'm
I'll slap
okay.
your hand. Here we go. Just,
He's a
anyways.
Get ready.
Can I get another
So,
slap too?
yeah, so yeah.
No. All right.
So-
Just warming up the hand just in
Sure.
case.
So a lot of people wanted to avoid tenancy rules because tenants typically get rights after 30 days. So they think, okay, if I do short-term rental, then I don't have to worry about, do I have to evict people or whatever. It's sort of like going to the Holiday Inn, right? If you decide to just kind of stay there, they're going to take you out, right? After you stop paying your daily rate, right? But Canada Revenue Agency, as part of sort of the overall housing crisis type thing in Canada, has sort of picked a big battle with short-term rental. So if you're renting for less than 30 days, it could be that you're just doing it. It could be Vrbo or Airbnb. It doesn't really matter if you use a platform or not. But a lot of people like these platforms because you can make higher daily rates. So if you buy a rental, let's say in Niagara Falls or something, and you're getting great tourist rates, then you can sometimes make a lot more money than a long-term rental. And you have to be careful of seasonality and so on. One of the big negative things that Canada Revenue Agency does with this is, let's say you buy what is typically viewed as a residential property.
You're scaring the kid talking about the CRA.
I know.
Come on, man.
This is enough to scare the parents, believe me. So you know, she's not wrong. But what was I going to say now? So yeah, so residential property. Yeah. So someone was asking about commercial versus residential. That doesn't matter at all for income tax. It matters a lot for HST, a lot. Because typically commercial properties are subject to HST. Residential properties, like your typical family home, are not. If you're buying directly from a builder, they'll have to charge you HST, and you'll get to claim a bit of a rebate, which can also be assigned to the buyer. But once you're into the secondary market, like Mr. Singh sells a property to Mr. Smith, then there's no HST in there anywhere usually. Now, the exception here would be the courts had a very unfavorable ruling a couple years ago on this, which is if you bought a family style house, right? You converted it to an Airbnb. What they're saying is that you've now changed your residential property into a commercial property. So now we want the HST when you sell, because this is a commercial property now, even though you didn't get to claim any when you bought it. So let's say you bought a property. So I'll give a worst case scenario to avoid here. You buy a property for $500,000. You Airbnb it for 2 years. You say, this isn't for me. I'm going to sell my property. Now you're going to have to charge $75,000 when you sell that property. Now here's the problem. In the residential market, let's say I'm, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and I'm going to look for a family house, right? I don't say, well, you've got a tax problem, I'll pay you an extra $75K, right? The residential market works how it works, right? A $500,000 house is a $500,000 house. So what they're going to say is, well, we're offering the same $500,000 this is worth to all the other ones in the neighborhood. If you have to go eat that $80,000, that is your problem. So what this really means is that...
Wait, I'll jump in there. It's because in the real estate contracts, you have an option to say, HST is included in this purchase price, or it is in addition to. And for the most part, HST, as I always put it, it's always included in the purchase price, because if the seller has any HST problems, I don't want it to be on my buyer to actually have to cover that. Sorry.
Yeah, so no, I'll take a minute to just tag up on that. So rule number one is make sure your realtor has experience with these things, because if they fill out that contract wrong, they could really mess you over big time. This happens on farms sometimes too. Once in a while, realtors who don't work with farms very often will fill out this contract wrong, and all of a sudden they've cost their client $200K in HST because they one box that says included instead of excluded, $200,000. That's an expensive box on a form. So
So you have to designate part of the property.
Yeah, so this is an area we cross over a fair bit. So I'll maybe give 3 more sentences, then let John go on that for a minute, which is, so this is a huge demotivator for people to do Airbnbs, as you might imagine. And this is what it was designed to do, because the philosophy behind this is that Canada and Ontario doesn't want people Airbnb-ing. They want the properties kept available for long-term renters, right? So you can love that, hate that, think it's smart, think it's stupid, think what you want about it, but that's what it does. Like, I'm just explaining how it works. And as a result, though, fewer people are doing the Airbnbs, or if they're going to buy an Airbnb property, it's going to be something more like, 10 or 12 rooms, set it up like a little mini hotel, buy it somewhere that's really touristy. And they know going in, I'm an Airbnb running this as basically a commercial operation, and that's who my future buyer is. So we're not going to flip flop on this thing of I'm running an Airbnb and I have to now go sell my property to a family to use as their house, right? So this is probably the biggest trouble with Airbnb, short-term rentals and all that to avoid. And I'll pass it down to John to carry on with that.
I'd love to ask a question about it.
Sure.
I'm one of those people who does own an Airbnb, and we have now for like the last 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
I love it. I think it produces a huge amount of income, and it's wonderful for having a place to actually go yourself and enjoy, which is one of the drawbacks of long-term rentals. However, in the last year or two, we've been in the quandary of to incorporate or not to incorporate. Right now, we are not. Benefit versus downside.
Future question.
Here's the question.
Future question. Okay.
Thank you for
it's going in the vault.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you for
going.
your
No,
question.
it's going in the vault.
You're just,
I'll
you're
get
just
it in
one
5
question
minutes.
before the rabbit hole. Give it a second. Jeez, this guy jumping into everything. Man, can someone go there and smack his hand, please? Give him a smack in the.
Listen, at least he's engaged. It's okay.
Yeah,
he's engaged.
he's just right in there,
listening.
just like this. Okay, give it a second. Give it a
engaged.
second. We're almost there.
So yeah, so on that point, all of that was great. I agree with everything he said. In terms of like how it affects an agreement, I do have one small little proviso, which is in residential, you're right. Every single time HST is included in the purchase price. In commercial, it's not like that. In commercial, a lot of times, it depends on who has more power in the relationship. Because if you are buying and you're a big purchaser and you're going to do whatever the heck you want to do and the buyer's a little guy, you put in your agreement that it's in addition to it's beneficial to the purchaser that it's included in the agreement. If you're a seller, you can put it's in addition to and make the purchaser pay it. So you can have a way to do it where, depending on who has more power in the commercial context, the agreement can be drafted either way. And when you have mixed commercial residential or mixed farmland residential, some parts of the property may be subject to HST and some parts may not. So the residential part in a farm, for example, is not going to be subject to HST. So if you have a $2 million farm, the house is worth $1.8 million and the actual farm is worth $200,000, HST is going to be owing on that farm property. And there's going to be some situations where that isn't true and there's a lot of complications. But most of the time, you will put a value in the agreement that says, we agree this is going to be HST and this is not going to be HST. Whether the CRA actually accepts that later on, I have no control over, but people will usually make it a point of negotiation. And usually after speaking to an accountant. For the love of God, speak to an accountant before putting something like that in your agreement.
And did you want to talk about landlord tenancy and commercial versus residential?
Yeah, that's also a big difference. So if you are renting to somebody in Ontario, as he noted, the big reason a lot of people do Airbnb is because tenants in Ontario are effectively miniature gods. They can do whatever the hell they want, and good luck at getting them out the door. I have clients who have had serious problems with professional tenants who know the law and who know the situation and who go in and say, okay, I'm going to pay you 2 months rent, and then I'm not going to pay rent for 6 months. And after 3 months, you're going to go to the landlord tenant board.
Yep.
It's going to take you 3 months to get in the front door. I'm going to claim hardship. They're going to give me an extra 3 months to get back to them. We're going to go back again. I'm going to say my mom's in the hospital. They're going to give me another 2 months. And at this point, you're a year in and you've gotten 2 months of rent. And so
hold on. The tenant board does not move that quickly.
that's true. This is a good scenario.
There
And
was a friend of mine, and a client of mine. And I mean, prior to COVID, I mean, tenants are great people. Any tenants here, they are great people. They're human beings too.
There are good and bad ones. And if you get a good one, it's great. You just get free money. If you get a bad one, yeah. And there are also, absolutely.
We're just talking about the law.
Yeah.
These guys are all going to
The specific rules, yeah.
The rate of professional tenants used to be somewhere around, I think it was like 2-point-something% prior to COVID, and then after COVID, some people said don't pay your rent if you don't have to. That number rose to something like 6.5%,
Yeah.
which is a
lot
giant
more.
number.
A lot more.
But yeah, if you ever have a tenant who is not paying, always hire a paralegal, have a lawyer handle the landlord tenant board thing, and 9 months, it's like you're
at
making
least you can
a
get them
tenant
out.
baby to get them
You
out.
can get them out. But there are people who know how to kind of extend that process as much as possible. So that's residential tenants. In Ontario, there are two separate laws that govern tenancies. There's Residential Tenancies Act, which is what gives the tenants all the power. And there's the Commercial Tenancies Act. So commercial tenancies, they assume, okay, everybody involved is a business person. You know what you're doing.
Yep.
Like the Residential Tenancies Act, they give all this power to the tenants because the ethical justification for it is, oh, tenants have no power. You as the landlord, if we give you free reign to do whatever you want, landlord, you're going to kick them out the door just because they don't want you to increase their rent by 30%. You're going to do all of this. You're going to kick them out. You're going to pretend you want to get your family in so that you can just renovate the property and rent it out for $3,000 more, whatever it is. So if we don't put rules on you, it's going to be the Wild West. You're going to have people on the street. With corporations, they assume everybody involved knows what they're doing. You all have relatively equal power. You as a corporate renter, you don't need this property to live. Like you're not going to die if you don't have a place to live. You're going in this as a sophisticated person who's ran all the numbers and knows what you're getting into. And so the Corporate Tenancies Act has very few restrictions that kind of force you to do certain things. Everything is what people agree to. So the contract you sign, the lease you sign, you can put specific stipulations in there that says, okay, the tenant has more power because the tenant can do this, this, and this, or the tenant can do that, or the tenant can terminate the agreement. Or you can have some very, very strong agreements where the landlord has all the power. Tenant can't do anything. The tenant is paying what's called a triple net lease, where the tenant pays literally every penny the landlord pays to upkeep the property, their insurance, their property taxes, their maintenance, everything the landlord pays to the property, the tenant pays them back in additional rent, every single cent.
Might be like if you rented a stall in a mall or something.
Exactly, or in like a.
They tell you what you're going to do where, when, and how.
Yeah.
They're trying to maintain order in a commercial environment.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to generate income on that square footage too.
Yeah, and they can put restrictions on what you're allowed to do on your property. They can put some very stringent restrictions. A lot of times they will have choice of use clause, which says, you said you were coming in here to do a hair salon. You're doing a hair salon. If you decide a week from now you want to change it to a nail salon, too bad. Or a cannabis shop. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, sorry, I won't get into that. Again, we're trying to keep it at the high level view. Not going to try. I have so many stories. But anyway, so because a commercial gives the people a lot more power, you have a lot more ability as a landlord in that case to kind of control what tenants you get and to basically make sure you have a good tenant. And if you have someone who does something stupid, you can get them out the door very quickly. And if they have a bunch of stuff in there, like if they don't pay you rent for 2 months and they've got like a bunch of Nikes in there, you can take those and sell them. It's called distrainment of goods. You can take anything they've got there that isn't owned by another third party and you can sell it and you can get your money back that way. You can just lock the door, lock them out, no problem. And the leases give you the abilities to do this very, very quickly, where instead of waiting 9 or 10 months for residential.
It's usually on the commercial side. It's usually most leases like 15 days. 15 days.
Yeah, 15 days. You haven't fixed the problem.
Chain them up, lock them out.
Lots of change. You're out the door.
And they gotta go to court. They pay all your fees, get it back.
Yeah, and if they don't like it, tough. That's
fairly
it.
ruthless.
And short-term Airbnb is more like the commercial. than-
Exactly, because it's treated in pretty much every legal
It's sort of
respect
like
as a
if you booked a
commercial.
room at a hotel and didn't pay for the second night.
Yeah. Some large men are going to come and teach you where the sidewalk is. That's what's going to happen if you do that. So yes, that's the main difference between commercial and residential. So I know you were talking earlier about mixed unit. So in that case, you now are talking about two different kinds of leases. So your residential tenants are still going to have their rights as residential tenants, and your commercial tenants are going to have a completely different lease. I will say, because commercial leases are much more complicated, they are way more expensive to draft. And it costs a lot more in lawyer time and going back and forth and things like that because there's more negotiation. Residential leases are very much take it or leave it because 95% of the lease is stipulated by the act. And you're basically it's the standard form of lease literally doesn't even have a lot of blanks on it. It just has a bunch of check boxes. Is this utility included? What's the actual rent amount? How long has this property been here? Because in Ontario, we actually have a rule that says you are rent controlled if your property hasn't been built or significantly updated since, I believe, November of 2019.
Yep.
So if it's older than that, your property can only be increased by rent a certain percentage per year. It's to encourage people to update their properties or to build new properties. So new properties, you can do whatever you want, which is why there was an article, I think, in the Globe and Mail a while ago about Toronto properties who all of a sudden decided to pump their rent up 30% in a single year. So in new properties, you're allowed to do that. In older properties, you can't.
Yeah,
So,
I have a client who is in downtown Toronto and was paying rent X amount, and her landlord's like, I need another $400 a month.
yeah.
That's it. It's not rent controlled.
I've seen over 1,000. And
they get away with it,
for
right?
a residential property. Yeah, because it's brand new. And if it's brand new, they're allowed to do that.
And a lot of them did it because interest rates went up.
Exactly.
Not just because they're, sitting around waxing the mustache or whatever.
I mean, there is definitely some of that too. But yes.
This over here, this is not a violin. It's not a violin in here.
No.
Right?
Because a lot of people were caught off guard with the mortgage. And so this is why the three of us are in here, because it's a vicious cycle that just keeps going around like
Yep.
this. And so like landlord gets a mortgage rent increase because of the rent. And if they bought recently, then the tenant gets the tenant rent increase.
If they haven't, then they have to eat it.
Yeah. So all of these are kind of touching pieces and moving pieces and all. Yeah.
And then on
It's
the tax side,
complicated,
if you end up selling that property because the mortgage's gone up, then you end up paying that taxes that you weren't prepared to pay as early as you were.
It's the circle of life.
No, it's a circle of tax, which
Now I know we were kind of jumping places back and forth, but one of the questions I did have was, should you buy as an individual or as a corporation, and maybe a little bit about joint ventures, partnerships.
Sure.
We were just about to talk about that, so let's get into it. Let's get into it now.
Yeah, not a problem. So the main thing that you have to think of at the beginning is, are you doing this individually or are you doing this multiple people? Because if you're doing this individually, you pretty much only have two choices. Your choices are doing it as what's called a sole proprietorship. I heard that word mentioned before, which is where you just do everything in your own name. Everything's under your name. You buy the property. You put John Smith entitled to the property. You pay taxes on everything that comes in as if it's your own income, that kind of thing. The other option is to incorporate. So you create what's called a numbered company. Usually it's an Ontario company. And you have your company you can call it whatever you want as long as that name hasn't already been taken, or you can just leave it as the number. So it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Ontario Incorporated. Under that numbered company, you have a certain number of people who will own shares, which is basically a percentage ownership of the company. And you can make these shares do a lot of different things. Like you can have shares for people who don't want to actually be involved. They're just going to give you money to invest and expect to get paid when profit come in. You have people who are actually going to be able to do things and make decisions on the corporation. However you can do that. The benefit of doing it on a corporate side is that you have this legal entity that sits between you and the danger. So the danger is, you can't pay your mortgage, or the market changes, or the house burns down and your insurance doesn't cover it because you had an arsonist and it's not covered. Terrorism, whatever, there's some exception in your insurance policy. And you have this problem that happens that can't be resolved, and that means that you have suffered a loss. If all of that loss is in the company, then you just close down the company, and you personally can be isolated from a lot of the risk of things going beyond what you originally put in. So you'll lose your investment, obviously. Like if you put $100,000 into the company to buy this property and to build it and to do whatever, that money, you're not getting it back. If there's a big problem that leads to the company collapsing, you're not going to get it back. But if you put in $100,000 and your losses are $500,000, if this is in your personal name, that $500,000 means you're putting your house up for sale, because you now have to pay that back to whoever the people are involved. And if not, you have to declare bankruptcy, and you don't want to do that. If you have a corporation, you just declare bankruptcy for the corporation. And as long as you haven't done anything, sneaky, illegal, fraudulent, where you've taken money out and tried to run to Jamaica or whatever, you haven't done something crazy where you've tried to specifically avoid paying your creditors, you're protected. So the only thing you'll ever lose is what you actually put in the company. You're not going to lose any of your house. You're not going to lose your personal assets. So that's the benefit from doing it yourself. Now, if you have multiple people involved, you can still do a corporation, because we can split a corporation's ownership among any number of people, up to about 50. Because when you get more than 50, you're no longer a closely held corporation. There's a bunch of tax implications. You got to do a prospectus. It's a lot of stuff. Generally, you want to just stay under 50 people. So, and most investment groups are not going to be more than, it's going to be you and 3 of your close friends. It's not going to be everybody who works at your office. So, you keep under 50, you're fine. You can split it up in any way you want. You can do those shareholder agreements to say this person, that person has control, whatever. You can also do, if you only have one project, so everyone's getting together to do one project, you can do a joint venture. So a joint venture is a contract between everyone that says, okay, we're all going to get together. We're going to buy this house, or we're going to buy this apartment building. We're going to build it up, we're going to renovate it, and then we're going to sell it. And we're all going to split it this way. And it's, Bob is putting in $100,000, Jill is putting in 50, Jack is putting in 50. So Bob gets 50% of the profit, Jack gets 25%, Jill gets 25%, because that's relative to the amount that they put in the first place. If you're putting in sweat equity, some people, you can negotiate to have more in that case because you're putting in your own time. And you can choose how to value that. Again, because this is a contract, it's assumed everyone involved is smart enough to know what the risks are and is smart enough to make decisions on their own. So you can put whatever you want into this contract. So you could say, you could have that split. You could say, well, I'm not putting any money in, but I'm a contractor. I'm going to pay for all my own materials. So we're going to pretend I put in $100,000 because I'm going to give you $100,000 worth of work.
Just interrupt. And that is how some contractors work with actually investment partners. They'll say, okay, you know what? We know this job, give or take, is going to cost $70,000. If you're going to buy this property, I'll put $70,000 worth of work into it, and when it is sold, I get the equivalent percentage
relative
back.
percentage of profit. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. I get my $70,000 back, and then based on how much that was, if $70,000 was 10% of what everyone else put in, I get my $70,000 back, and then I get 10% of the profit.
Yeah.
So you can do that however you want. A partnership is a bit different. A partnership is if you want to do this on a regular basis with the same people over and over again. Because a partnership creates a legal kind of, it's kind of weird because it's sort of a semi-person. It's in between a corporation and kind of a non-legal entity, because it counts as a person for some things, some tax purposes. It doesn't count for other things. So you can't own property as a partnership. You'll have to kind of create a legal entity that can do that. But the partnership kind of creates a semi-permanent kind of legal relationship between people. And you have to be very careful sometimes with joint ventures because they can bleed over into partnerships if you act certain ways or do certain things. So you should always talk to a lawyer before you kind of decide how you're structuring these things.
Oh
because
wait,
you can,
if you're dancing with your joint venture partner at a Coldplay concert, does that mean you're in a partnership?
Yeah,
Is that how that works?
Yeah. So that at that point, yes. At that point, you have to hire. At that point, you are no longer hiring a real estate lawyer. You are hiring a divorce lawyer.
All right.
And I have it's a lucky coincidence because I happen to be married to one. So
Okay.
I'm not going anywhere, suffice to say. So in a situation like that, where you have a joint venture or a partnership, the real big kind of risk in terms of this, I know I'm always the downer. I'm talking about, hey, here's all the bad stuff that can happen to you. The risk in a partnership is that when you have established a partnership between people, that other guy in your partnership, he can sign contracts. And you can be bound to those contracts.
Yep.
So if you have like two contractors who are partner and one of them quotes a job and signs it and doesn't even tell you about it, and some of that involved work you're doing, you can still be bound to do that work at that price. And you're stuck with it. Because a partnership means that both of you have sometimes the ability to bind the other. You can get this in a corporation too. But at that point, it's only the corporation's assets are at risk. With a partnership, it could be your own butt on the line. Because it's you who's on the partnership. It's you who now has to do whatever the other guy agreed to. And this includes even if the other guy gets defrauded or signs a really stupid agreement, you can be caught with it.
And just to give a little extra explanation on there, the big difference between the partnership and the corporation is there's no legal entity separating your personal stuff from the company.
Yeah.
So like to give you an example, I have a business partner, and I call him that, his name's Mark, he's up back there. He's got coffee all over his shirt.
Just a call. Sharp.
So we refer, we're business partners, but we don't have a partnership. We have a corporation. We each own 50%. And so what that really means is there's a legal entity between like he and I and all the stuff. As a partnership, it's you as an individual, the other person as an individual. So the end of that story is you have a partnership. Your partner does something that results in a contract where you lose money and maybe have to pay something. You would have to declare personal bankruptcy to get out of it, even though they signed it and you didn't.
Yeah.
In the corporate example, you just
Close the
de-six the corporation and both people are actually okay. So this is why partnerships are almost universally hated. For many reasons.
I recommend everybody, if you're going to do real estate investment, do a corporation. It'll cost you like $2,000 and it's going to save you. If there's a big problem that happens, it could save you $500,000. Worth it every time. Trust me. Yeah, it's just the easiest thing. Now, that sometimes, as Chris noted, there are some tax reasons, like in certain situations where you're balancing your capital gains, you might want to do some stuff in your own name. But from a risk perspective, corporation every time, every single time. So.
All right. Okay. Well, that's that. Now, guys, we're gonna have a quick little Q&A session over here. Too bad for my microphone. But does anybody have any quick questions? And I do want to let you know, after all your questions, we're going to give away a couple great prizes. So everyone, please have some great questions and shoot.
I do have a question. So one thing I was looking into is small and business loan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I did read that I could use part of that loan to purchase a property as well. I'm looking at it as a lawyer. So how does that work? And then like just in general.
So I heard the word loan, so I'm probably going to pass off in this general direction because I don't have a lot of knowledge about that particular one.
You can use it. So essentially, the way for commercial financing is similar to residential. We still have an obligation in Canada. We have to adhere to anti-money laundering legislation. We still have to show a paper trail. So you can still use it. The short answer is yes, you can still use it to purchase a property. Absolutely. You just have to have it in your corporate account, have it there. Don't just, get the money in on Monday, but close on your transaction on Friday. You want to have it in your name. I personally, my general guidance, which it does leap over a little bit from residential, but it's always better to be safe than sorry. You want to ideally have that in your name. Whether you are buying it on residential side or corporate side, 90 days.
Okay,
3
what
months.
I understand is that if I were to have something like this into, I need to create a plan and show them what the property is.
Yes.
Like I would become things in place, like the ball.
So I can kind of pop in here. So what you can do in that situation, when you're not sure that you're going to be in a position to close a transaction, when you're talking to your real estate agent, you mention that to them immediately. And the real estate agent can draft conditions in your agreement. So a lot of agreements when they start out are conditional, which means that in certain situations, you can back out of the agreement. You get your deposit back, you walk away, no one gets sued, everyone's still happy. And as long as you still have these conditions, which means your deal is conditional, you can back out if these conditions trigger. So the most common condition you will see, there's 2 common conditions. One is for inspection of the property. The other is for mortgage financing. So you will say, I get 10 days, 5 days, whatever it is after we sign this agreement, I'm going to go talk to my bank. I'm going to get mortgage instructions that are satisfactory to me. And if I don't get them, I get to back out of the deal. And so you can put conditions for due diligence, or if you want to put condition for financing, you want to put 90 days on that, you can do that. It makes your deal less competitive, so you may not get your property, because for some sellers, it may be a deal breaker, because a seller wants a firm deal. A seller wants a deal that says, no matter what, you're bound. If we pick August 1st as a closing date, this property is going to close on August 1st. And I'm going to get my money on August 1st. I don't have to worry about anything. Conditional means, well, maybe you have to put this back up on the market. You know, there's a chance this person's going to back out and walk away. So a buyer or a seller is always going to prefer a firm deal. A buyer prefers to save themselves with conditions. So it's a balancing act.
Okay.
What is it called? What do you typically see for like mixed properties, for residential upstairs and storefronts for down payments? What they ask?
It depends on
Yeah.
the listing.
It's going to depend on the real estate itself, the location for sure, because obviously real estate here in Hamilton is different than Kitchener, different than Burlington, different than Toronto. On average, the general guideline that I like to give, without going into the whole, oh, you can do a vendor take back or second mortgage, without going into that, in general, you want to position yourself with at least 30% down. I would say comfortably 35, just that way it opens up all the doors of lending to you. When you start going into it like residential, saying, oh, I've got 5% down or 12% down, then you have to constrict yourself. You have to start shortening the pool of lenders. So the more on commercial basis, especially in mixed use, if you can walk into that with 30, 35% down, you just have like, you get your pick of, okay, I like this offer, this offer, this offer. So I'd say 30 to 35% is typically what I recommend for down payment on that type.
I'll mention one brief thing about the specific one you mentioned, the Canada Small Business Loan Financing.
There we go. Thanks, Dana.
Those are
Thanks,
administered by banks. They have oftentimes a little more to do with like helping a business owner acquire a commercial property that's going to help them run their business. But you can still look at it from a real estate perspective. So for instance, if you went to the bank with a business plan that looks like, I want to open hair salon, hair shop, makeup, whatever, we're going to buy this mixed res commercial. We're going to live on the back. We're going to have retail in the front. Maybe we're even going to have another commercial tenant to help make the whole thing work and give us some room to expand. They may like that deal, and then you're getting a business and a commercial property out of it, right? And you may sell part of it someday. You may sell half of it someday. Where you're not going to have a lot of that, as much success with that specific program, is if it's really hardcore real estate, like real estate is the business. They really like that B in the business part of it. So that's where you can put good real estate deals together though with that. It's just there has to be more components. Otherwise, you're not really dealing with that program.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, it just has to be more elaborate than just I'm buying a property.
Mortgage, taxes, and insurance, TMI. We'll get to that in a little bit too.
And I think this, I forgot some of your question from earlier. Did you want to? It was related to Airbnbs and keeping or selling Airbnbs and so on.
I would have said incorporate or not.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay.
But that would actually be the incorporation. That would actually be better for the handout than incorporation.
Yeah, so there's also like estate planning considerations. You can do things like estate freezes where you can start kind of lock in your value and move any future value to your next generation. Another fancier thing we haven't talked about is like family trusts. Sometimes there's a role for that, where you can maybe make a corporation held in trust by, where your kids are the beneficiaries. Typically, we start getting into things like that if you've got more than a couple $1 million, just because at some point you're saying, I'm just making tax problems for myself at this point, and I want to focus more on how do I get assets to my kids tax efficiently down the road. But
From the corporate concern that as the mortgage goes down, you have to offset the cost of the profit you're going to make from the rental itself.
Yeah.
At that point, I imagine the corporate is most benefit, you can just keep it within the corp.
Yeah.
Avoid some of the tax implications of spending.
So I'll even split the difference with you on that one a little bit. That's a good idea. What's very popular now is if people have heard of Airbnb arbitrage, right? Where you rent from someone else and then sublease it out. You can do that with yourself. So you can, with if you have two different entities. So let's say you own the Airbnb property, right? And you say, I don't want to pay land transfer tax for switching this to another corp. I don't want to pay my capital gain right now. Maybe I'm going to buy 2 or 3 more properties, make a corp. I'm going to do a long-term rental agreement with them, which is going to lower my personal income. Then all the real money's made in the corp, and that's all active over there because it doesn't own the property. It's collecting rent and paying me rent. So now we've converted that over to active income and away from passive, and you haven't had to sell your property.
All right, we're gonna dig out of the weeds a little bit over here. What I do want to say is, does anybody else have any more quick questions they want to ask? No else questions? What I would suggest, everyone, you do have your sheets over there. If you guys want to book in a meeting or an appointment with any of these guys over here, they're free for like a 15-minute consult to be able to answer your questions, help you kind of build a strategy and put you in a position to succeed in terms of whatever your goals are. We're going to get into some prizes in the next little bit over here. There we go. 2 bets off. So what we'll do is we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Everyone top up on a little bit of coffee. We get a couple snacks out here. Eat, drink, enjoy, stretch out the legs. And then we're going to be giving away a bottle of Fireball, a neck fan, vacuum, some swag, and a cooler backpack.